territory exchange and election schedule, what the parties agreed on during the second meeting in Miami. Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law are flying to Putin with a new plan seeking his favor. The US will not refuse Kiev's NATO membership, but will effectively block it. Meanwhile, Ukrainian soldiers have no intention of leaving Donbas, even despite a possible order from above. The main intelligence directorate and partisans blew up a group of Kadyrovites in Zaporizhzhia. Scandals with the Southern Defense Command. They published a fake video of the defense of Huliaipole. The armed forces of Ukraine are implementing robotic command posts and testing new weapons against the occupiers. The occupiers are planning to poison the Dnipro River. War and sky-high prices did not stop the New Year holidays in Bukovel from being sold out again. All this and more coming up. Hello, my name is Katerina Kolhan. Let's start the information week together. The meeting between the American and Ukrainian delegations in Florida ended with promising results, but with a clear understanding that a final agreement is still a long way off. The US is pressuring Ukraine for a complete withdrawal of the armed forces from Donbas. Negotiations on a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia have reached their most difficult phase, as the most painful issues are being discussed: territories, elections, and security guarantees. The final text has not yet been agreed upon. The Wall Street Journal reports that the Americans are conveying to Ukraine Russia's position, which demands the complete withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from all of Donbas, including the areas not currently occupied. However, Ukraine categorically rejects this demand. Members of the delegation explained that this is unrealistic due to constitutional constraints, public opinion, and the situation on the front lines. Other key issues such as security guarantees from the US and the West also remain unresolved. At the same time, several media outlets report that Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff urged the Ukrainians to opt for a 10-year exemption of Ukrainian goods from US DMID. In his opinion, this is better than Tomahawk missiles. He claims that this is also much more advantageous for Kyiv, and a small number of missiles won't make any difference at all. However, this only shows how far removed he is from understanding reality in general, because, for example, exports to the US account for only 2% of Ukraine's total exports. Witkoff himself and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are flying to Moscow on December 2nd to continue negotiations, this time with Putin. Peskov says they will meet before December 4th to 5th, before the Kremlin leader's trip to India. Meanwhile, it has become known that the Ukrainian side insists on a personal meeting between Zelensky and Trump to resolve sensitive issues, possibly before the end of December. Trump previously stated that he would meet with Zelensky and Putin only when the deal is finalized. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the negotiations very productive. However, he added that they remain realistic about how difficult all of this looks, as well as about the progress that has already been made. It's not just about ending the war, but also about building a prosperous future for Ukraine. The Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rosamomirov, also called the meeting successful and thanked the Americans for their support in the peace process. The first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Serhiy Kyslytsya, also gave a positive assessment of the negotiations. And although he writes about the warm atmosphere that contributed to a potentially progressive outcome, what draws attention is his posture in the photo he chose to accompany his post. And in diplomacy, the language of gestures and body language plays an extremely important role. Negotiations with Ukraine regarding a new settlement plan are going well. This is how Donald Trump commented on the meeting. The US president also said that corruption in Kyiv is a serious problem that hinders the process, but at the same time, there is a good chance to reach an agreement. During his conversation with journalists, Trump also answered a question about deadlines for Russia. He said that he does not plan to pressure Moscow with deadlines, but expects progress very soon. And against the backdrop of this corruption scandal, Washington is seeking to speed up the peace agreement. The Washington Post writes that the US will increase pressure on Zelenskyy this week. The publication refers to sources in the White House who are confident that the Americans will use the situation to push Ukraine toward a compromise. At the same time, analysts believe that if Kyiv does not make concessions, the US may reduce aid, citing corruption as the reason. But there is something the US is not taking into account. Ukrainian soldiers will not retreat from key positions in Donbas, despite possible orders from above. NBC News reports this. Ukrainian fighters call Trump's plan a capitulation. The article states that Ukrainian armed forces soldiers holding the front line near Pokrovsk have said they will not follow orders to withdraw troops without clear explanations from the command. The publication even quotes Senior Sergeant Volodymyr Zhavsky, a 44-year-old fighter from Donetsk region. Even if an order comes, it will not be carried out without justification, he told journalists. According to him, no one will make concessions regarding the territories because this is our land and we are standing here. The soldiers dream of returning to peaceful lives, but they reject a plan that, in their opinion, negates the sacrifices of the fallen and the efforts of the Ukrainian armed forces. The proposed limitation of the armed forces to 600,000 personnel is also perceived as a threat to national security. DeepState accuses the Southern Defense Forces Command of lying about information from the front. Analysts criticize them for a manipulative video that was supposed to illustrate the successful stabilization of the situation near Huliaipole. Instead, the footage that was published actually belongs to an operation by the 33rd Separate Mechanized Brigade in the Kurbsky direction back in the summer of 2025, and not to events in the Zaporizhzhia region. After this, the Southern Defense Forces removed the video from their official channels, and spokespersons stated that the information was not accurate and was aimed at discreditation. The National Security and Defense Council confirmed the destruction of Russian assault groups near Huliaipole, but avoided commenting on the manipulation. Alexei Frolov will tell you in more detail about what is really happening at the front.
Greed that cut short the lives of Russian occupiers. Near Berdyansk, during a special operation, Chechen Kadyrovites were sent to the other world, according to the main intelligence directorate. So, Ukrainian partisans found out that the valiant marauders of Don had set up a scheme to sell the diesel fuel they had stolen. The bearded men were selling the diesel at the same spot, on the highway near Berdyansk. That very spot became their mass grave. As a direct and immediate result of a highly precise and well-executed strike, two distinct military vehicles, specifically those carrying Akhmat fighters, were successfully and effectively hit and neutralized. And that's not all. This weekend, Putin also came up 2 tankers short from his shadow fleet. They were under sanctions for being involved in transporting Russian oil and were attacked in the Black Sea by Ukrainian Sea Baby drones.
The Kadyrov tanker and Verat, I think that's right, encountered Ukrainian drones. The incident took place near the coast of Turkey, but in neutral waters, so there can be no claims against us. How did it happen? It is reported that these were SPU drones. Not just any drones, but very special ones, because they even leaked video footage. And this unprecedented attack on Russian tankers, de facto Russian, not de jure, but in actual fact de facto, will undoubtedly have simply incredible and far-reaching consequences. We have finally and decisively decided to implement our very own significant sanctions on this particular issue, taking a firm stance. We are attacking not only Novorossiysk, not only Tuapse, but also accordingly these tankers that are transporting oil. Well, or rather, in this case, not transporting, but had transported. No.
Russians will find no peace, neither at sea nor on land. In fact, the armed forces of Ukraine are giving the occupiers no respite on any section of the front without exception. Ukrainian border guards shared a video report on the work they have accomplished. Their drone operators destroyed enemy shelters, communication equipment, and UAV control antennas in the northern Slobodyansky direction. As a result, the enemy in this area has effectively lost its eyes and ears and is temporarily unable to conduct full-scale combat operations. The enemy's situation is no better in their own rear. There, on the outskirts of the village of Mokra Orlivka in the Belgorod region, our MiG-29 fighter from the Ghost of Kiev unit delivered a high-precision strike on the occupiers' command post. The Kremlin does not admit which of the Russian generals came under the strike of the Ukrainian fighter jet. However, Ukrainian intelligence hints that as a result of the raid, the Russian army may be missing several high-ranking military officials at once. Nevertheless, the Russian army continues to put on a brave face despite the unfavorable situation and is desperately trying to prove to the whole world, and apparently to Putin first and foremost, that the so-called special military operation declared by Moscow is going according to plan. So, following their old tradition, Russian flag bearers tried to raise their tricolor over a building in Vovchansk, as if to say the settlement is already under the occupiers' control. But here's the catch. A Ukrainian drone disagreed with them. We are here to...
We are sending a message to Vladimir Putin, and not just to Vladimir Putin, that all his stories about everything going according to plan and him being in a state of permanent calm, that none of this affects him, are simply not true. But here.
Unique shots from a Ukrainian unmanned ground vehicle equipped with an M2 Browning machine gun. In the middle of the night, it encountered Russian armored vehicles on the road. For the occupiers, the encounter was a complete surprise, and for the crew of the MTLB and the armored vehicle itself, it was their last combat mission. They were left not only without their equipment, but also without the means to transport it. Even in the rear, Russian occupiers can only dream of peace. And it's all thanks to the concerned partisans. They carried out a successful sabotage operation in Berdyansk, delivering a precise blow to the enemy's railway logistics. As a result, an electric locomotive used by the Russian army to transport military cargo was turned into a pile of scrap metal, creating significant supply problems for the occupying front, and disrupted the schedules of trains carrying ammunition, equipment, and fuel that were being prepared for dispatch to the front line in the Sumy direction. Overall, in the past day alone, the Russians lost at least 5 tanks, 7 artillery systems, 2 multiple rocket launchers, and another 1,000 soldiers.
Russians, a big hello to you. From
The armed forces of Ukraine are testing new weapons against Russian glide bombs and Shaheds. This was reported by the General Staff. According to intelligence and the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the enemy has intensified its airstrikes. Just in November, the Russians launched 138 Shaheds, most of which, over 90%, were successfully intercepted by Ukrainian air defense. At the same time, attacks with KABs continue. These are cheap but precise glide bombs with wings and satellite guidance launched from a safe distance outside the range of air defense systems. These strikes are testing Ukrainian defenses, so the armed forces of Ukraine must adapt to new tactics. From September to November, the anti-aircraft missile troops of the Air Force destroyed about 100 Russian aerial bombs, despite their small radar signature and short flight time. Ukrainian soldiers are actively testing the latest weaponry, but they are not disclosing any details. And the achievements of the Ukrainian military are not limited to the air. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian multi-purpose transporter that was heading into an assault with infantry. The Russians tried to break through the Ukrainian military's defenses, but a ground robotic system operated by the fighters of the 5th Separate Assault Kiev Brigade instantly destroyed the enemy's MTLB armored vehicle. A single precise volley turned it into scrap metal. The brigade also highlighted the role of domestic developers. They thanked the engineers who are implementing and creating new opportunities for the Ukrainian military. The fact that some of the most dangerous tasks on the front line are gradually being handed over to machines, preserving the lives of infantry, is steadily becoming a military trend. This new defense concept was also announced by the General Staff. Ukraine is preparing to create the world's first fully robotic strongpoints. According to this concept, a comprehensive iron stronghold is being established. In addition to ground-based robotic systems with machine guns, there will be strike and reconnaissance UAVs, interceptor drones, remote combat modules, enhanced electronic warfare and optoelectronic suppression systems, as well as autonomous power supply and secure communications. However, there will not be fully autonomous fortresses just yet. Machines still require people for maintenance, logistics, and decision-making. But the most dangerous sections of the front line are already being handed over to robots. One machine can replace a platoon at a position where people used to die. The GUR and partisans from the anti-Russian occupation movement blew up Kadyrov's men in Zaporizhzhia. Fighters from the Akhmat unit set up an illegal business selling stolen diesel fuel on the highway near temporarily occupied Berdyansk. The occupiers gathered to talk at the entrance to the city, but their conversation was interrupted by a powerful explosion. Ukrainian intelligence operatives mined the trading spot where the profiteers were hoarding the stolen fuel. 5 invaders from the so-called National Guard were eliminated, and 4 more were seriously wounded. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine delivered powerful strikes on the aircraft repair plant in Taganrog, where strategic Tu-95 bombers, cruise missile carriers, and a 50 long-range radar detection aircraft are modernized. It suffered a direct hit. A fire broke out in the Tu-95 repair workshop. According to preliminary estimates, hangars and component warehouses were hit. The plant that supplies fuel to the Russian occupation forces, the Afipsky oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai, was also struck once again. A series of explosions and a large-scale fire were recorded in the target area. Preliminarily, the primary oil processing units have been damaged. By the way, this is already the 3rd strike on this refinery this autumn. The plant processes up to 7 million tons of oil per year, supplying fuel for tanks and other logistics of the occupiers. During the operation, the RV-5000 tank at the marine oil terminal in the port of Tuapse was also hit, where fuel for the Russian Black Sea Fleet is stored. The explosions were heard within a radius of dozens of kilometers.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
A record 40% of Russia's state budget for 2026 and the following 3 years is being allocated by Putin to war and security forces. Which budget sectors will suffer due to the imperial ambitions of the Kremlin dictator? More details on this coming up.
A third of the budget goes to war, and the sums allocated to the military sector are the highest since Soviet times. Putin has signed Russia's budget for the upcoming 2026 year.
The government will have to...
And he had nothing to propose except tightening belts and increasing military spending. And so, according to the document, about 30% of the budget is planned to be spent on the army, which is nearly 13 trillion rubles. As the Moscow Times notes, this hasn't happened since the Soviet era. Also, just under 4 trillion is allocated for the national security line item, from which the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the National Guard, Special Services, and the penitentiary system are funded. All these agencies, to one extent or another, are also involved in the war against Ukraine. According to experts, the budget simply cannot withstand such a burden,
and consequently, it will not be able to hold up under the expected pressure or scrutiny, leading to its eventual failure. Let's pull up the overall picture for GDP and inflation. Well, in short, you get it. Everything is actually a mess. Inflation is high, GDP is at 0, and in the 4th quarter, we expect it to be in the negative. All the official figures they provide are, generally speaking, not exactly made up, but they do try to embellish them with some isolated good indicators.
but you can already count the good indicators in Russia on the fingers of one hand. And by 2026, there will be even fewer of them. After all, those record sums for the war have to come from somewhere. And yes, the share of social spending in the Russian budget next year will drop from the pre-war 38% to 25%. Spending on economic support will fall from 17.5% to less than 11%. And 2026 hasn't even arrived yet, but according to the official forecasts of Putin's economists, a deficit is already guaranteed. After all, the country expects to earn a little over 40 trillion rubles, but plans to spend more than 44. The difference, just for a second, is $166 billion.
Of course, they need to be told that the high inflation we're seeing today, and in reality it hasn't gone anywhere, inflation remains high. They need to be told that this is supposedly caused by some temporary factors. They need to be told that, as it were, the overall numbers look nice.
At the same time, some indicators are lagging behind tremendously. For example, the regional budget deficit is projected to be 800 billion rubles, while aid from the Kremlin is only set at 30 billion.
This means that for regional budgets, they will inevitably have to make some very significant and substantial cuts to their various expenditure items. And the crucial question is, what exactly can they realistically cut? Again, payments to contract soldiers, since this is a very large part, a very large share of their regional budget expenditures. Well, after that, they have to cut social spending. Social spending, spending on repairs and maintenance of housing and utilities and so on.
At the same time, experts note that the Russian budget was drafted over several months, and the risks factored into it were only up to the beginning of autumn at most. But Trump, with his sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, created enormous problems for Russia at the end of the year.
As for the prominent Lukoil and the significant Rosneft, of course, the situation is indeed quite difficult for Russia, because these two major companies collectively contribute to almost 50% of the entire national export volume.
But despite all the obvious factors, officially everything is fine in Russia. They are trying to shift the entire deficit onto the regions. In Moscow and St. Petersburg, as always, everything is just fine. So once again, they can write a new report about economic growth.
In other words, they could have shown the real picture, that for the second or third quarter in a row, GDP is at a complete standstill. But they still fudge the numbers to show something like 0.6 so they can claim, like, no, we're not in a recession yet.
Notably, 2026, according to analysts' estimates, with its obviously unrealistic figures, might finally push the common people to take to the streets. And this primarily concerns the residents of Russia's remote regions.
All this wealth of natural resources that the Russian Federation as a state possesses, it's no longer in Moscow. The main wealth isn't even in the European part of Russia, but beyond the Urals. And these peoples, these parts of the Federation, they inevitably start to ask, why should we keep feeding Moscow, which lives in luxury, maybe also St. Petersburg and a few other very large cities, while we ourselves live in poverty?
Moreover, one of the most important factors driving discontent will be the new taxation on small businesses. Analysts suggest that more than half of private enterprises will simply be suffocated by the increased duties. Or alternatively, the owners might end up suffocating those who came up with this idea.
Russia is preparing an environmental catastrophe in Kherson. According to Channel 24, Ukrainian intelligence intercepted a combat order from the Russian army, which indicates preparations for large-scale war crimes in Kherson. The Kremlin's goal is not just a military offensive, but the complete destruction of critical infrastructure to make the city uninhabitable. According to secret documents published by the outlet, the Russians plan to cross the Dnipro River and attempt to capture the Korabel district. Experts consider this maneuver unlikely due to the strong defense of the Ukrainian armed forces and natural obstacles. But Moscow is ready to take the risk. The occupiers also want to intensify massive attacks on the energy infrastructure and water treatment facilities of Kherson using strike drones and ballistic missiles. The coordinates of at least 10 key sites have already been identified in these documents. They are planning the complete destruction of the wastewater treatment systems, which will result in untreated sewage being discharged into the Dnipro River. Even now, after the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant and ongoing shelling, the levels of chlorides and phosphates exceed the norms by 1.2 to more than 4 times. The consequences of such ecocide will be catastrophic. Untreated sewage flows into the Black Sea, causing mass fish die-offs and the accumulation of heavy metals in the ecosystem. Migratory species such as flounder, mullet, and gobies may become toxic for consumption. The Black Sea risks becoming devoid of fish within just a few years. This threat will not be limited to Ukraine. The pollution will also spread to NATO and EU countries. Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria, whose coastlines border the Black Sea, may also feel the impact on their fisheries, tourism, and water resources. Russians are afraid to buy apartments, and it's all because of Larisa Dolina. The pro-Putin singer sold her apartment and gave the proceeds from the sale to fraudsters. But the system took her side and returned the apartment to the singer, who, by the way, justifies Russian military aggression. As a result, the buyers of the apartment were left at a loss, since Dolina never returned their money. More details coming up.
Connections in the Kremlin are being massively cancelled for the pushy pro-Putin artist Larisa Dolina. The name of the popular artist is now closely associated with fraudulent schemes and deception.
The Dolina effect is a phenomenon caused by the spread of a scheme in which the seller of an apartment soon after its sale tries to challenge the transaction, claiming to have become a victim of fraudsters and lost the money from the sale.
It all started after the Z artist, having been deceived by scammers, used her government connections to take it out on the apartment buyer.
A day earlier, the Cassation Court upheld the decision on the complaint filed by the apartment buyer, Polina Luri. Larisa Dolina was given back the apartment she had sold on the advice of scammers, and it was stated that the singer does not have to return the money to the buyer since Luri is capable of suing the scammers herself for compensation.
After the decision of the Russian injustice system to make an innocent woman the scapegoat, leaving her without money or an apartment, both companies and listeners began to cancel Larisa Dolina.
Friends, we have made an important decision. Larisa Dolina's house in Moscow has been temporarily excluded from the delivery zone. Until the customer's money is fully refunded, our juicy Whoppers and crispy fries will not be delivered there. People's Artist of Russia, Larisa Dolina may be cut from the musical film The Incredible Adventures of Shurik. It has become known that the main reason is the negativity surrounding the People's Artist's name due to the apartment scandal.
Did you know that the Dolina wall has appeared in Moscow? After this high-profile case, Muscovites have a new urban legend. Buyers of real estate on the secondary market are bringing to Dolina's house, they bring all sorts of souvenirs, toys, locks, candles, and the most interesting thing is that they bring slippers. Slippers are a symbol of home comfort. According to legend, if you bring them to Dolina's house before buying an apartment, the deal will go well. The seller won't fall under the influence of scammers and later won't try to reclaim the apartment. They also leave notes. Let's carefully see what's there. Old lady, don't trick us with a two-room apartment. Old lady, don't trick us with a two-room apartment. Let's hope that the wall of Dolina really helps honest buyers and I'll light the candles. May everyone's deals go through without setbacks or court cases.
Now, Larisa Dolina is conquering the trends of Russian social networks. Of Russians to one of the songs by the Z artist are demanding their money back as well as various purchases and trips since they were under the influence of scammers. Besides hundreds of thousands of listeners, Dolina has also angered her colleagues in the industry. According to them, the actions of the Z artist's followers have cast a shadow over all Russian performers for whom selling their own apartments has become almost
It is utterly impossible to achieve this particular outcome given the current circumstances and the inherent limitations we face. There are simply too many insurmountable obstacles standing in our way, making any attempt to proceed futile and ultimately unachievable. Simply because of this unfortunate situation, I actually have to go through all the various drug rehabilitation clinics, going here and there, for some particular reason, and it's all just completely unclear. And if buyers know that I'm an artist, then apparently I might try to scam someone.
There were also those who came to the defense of the singer, calling her a swindler. Just like Dolina herself, these are artists who serve Putin. Grigory Leps, Valeria and Iosif Prigozhin believe that the artist did the right thing regarding the apartment issue. And as arguments in Dolina's favor, they cite her support for the war unleashed by Putin.
One could say it's some kind of conspiracy, a special operation against her. Dolina found herself in the role of a sinner whom everyone wants to stone. I don't want to be among those who throw stones at her. That's not Christian. Everyone is criticizing Stebuts now, but Dolina is a patriot. She has lived for 70 years in this world. She performed on the front lines for free.
Pro-Putin artists are absolutely convinced that supporting the war and serving the Kremlin's interests gives them a free pass in any disputes or conflicts with ordinary Russians.
Bukovel remains the most expensive and at the same time the most popular ski resort in Ukraine, even during wartime. There's a real boom in bookings for the New Year holidays, and this is despite Ukrainians' concerns about the activity of the Central Command and the difficult situation with leaving their region of residence. It seems Ukrainians are willing to pay any price to celebrate New Year in the Carpathians. According to Booking, by early December, about 80% of all accommodations for the period from December 24th to January 8th have already been booked. And at the same time, the most expensive properties are the first to go. The prices are shocking. Some hotels have raised their prices by 300 to 500%, and the difference in the cost of the same room between a weekday and New Year's Eve can reach 30 to 62,000 hryvnias. Despite this, demand is crazy. Spa hotels on New Year's Eve will cost up to 20,000 hryvnias per night. And the same room that costs 6,000 to 7,000 hryvnias on a weekday is being sold for 35,000 to 40,000 hryvnias on December 31st. And for chalets and cottages, you'll have to shell out up to 60,000 to 85,000 hryvnias per night. Budget options are also running out quickly. That's all I have time to tell you for now. Please like this video, leave a comment and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the most up-to-date news. See you!